Over the weekend, I was watching this game play out, and there's an interesting common piñata out there. The independent presidential candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The media is increasingly coming at Kennedy because they are increasingly realizing, because of what they're hearing from their buddies in the parties, that Kennedy will probably determine the outcome of this election if he gets on the ballots. I don't know that he can win, but he can certainly affect the outcome. So they are putting him in cleanup mode constantly. And I have him on tonight to do that in part. But I want to talk to him about the bigger dynamic, because you can gotcha all three of these guys all day long, okay? But is that in the best interest of the people? So now it's what he said about January 6th, okay? The quote is, "I haven't examined the evidence in detail, but reasonable people, including Trump opponents, tell me there is little evidence of a true insurrection." Now, people got really pissed about that statement because of video scenes like this, okay? He also said that a widely debunked claim that participants in the January 6th riot carried no weapons. A few hours later, he retracted that part of the statement. Good for him. That alone is rare these days, right? You have in Trump, you know, he'd rather fight to the death than admit he was wrong about anything. You've never heard him admit he was wrong, except about that tape with the "let him grab you by the honk, right? That was the only time we've ever seen it. And he probably regrets that. So why did he issue the statement in the first place? And what does he think about his role in this dynamic, which is going to be a gotcha-thon all the way through? Joining me now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Happy to give you the opportunity, Bobby. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Chris, and thank you. And I really enjoyed your lead talking about the eclipse and how that brought Americans together. And you know, your observation that there are vested interests out there that are trying to keep us apart, to try to keep us at each other's throats, but that we still have a common ground and that we can find it in instances like today. That was very beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. You know, you talked about my what I would say were unforced errors this weekend. We made a couple of mistakes. It started with a email that went out about January 6th from my campaign that did not reflect my views about January 6th, and then it was followed very quickly by a press release that had the factual error in it. And you know, all I can say that this is my responsibility. It's my campaign. We have a lot of hardworking people on the campaign, but we're all drinking from fire hoses. We have to do things that other campaigns don't. We have to get 1.5 million signatures. We have to pay for our own Secret Service. We are able to raise only a tiny fraction of the money that the other campaigns. They can get $100,000. They can get $1 million per donor. We are only allowed to take $6,600 per donor. We're trying to make do with less, and we make mistakes, and I made 2 mistakes this week, and I left people with the impression that I did not share, I think, what is the general consensus about January 6th, that it was a traumatic day in our nation's history, that there were police who were beaten, who were assaulted, that there were congressional members who were threatened, that there were people who were intending to obstruct the peaceful transfer of power in this country, and that's not okay. And it's not okay even if you believe it was an insurrection was stolen. I think it was a protest that turned into a riot. I think there were people who wanted an insurrection. I don't know what your definition of an insurrection is. If your definition is armed men who are intending to take over the United States government. It wasn't that. I think there were people there who wanted to obstruct the peaceful transfer of power from one administration to the other. So it was I would say it was a very traumatic day in our nation's history, and that, people committed criminal acts. Those people deserve to be in jail.
Right.
One of the statements that I made that upset people is I said that I would appoint a special counsel to look at. There was 350 people convicted of a statute that's obstructing the procedure of Congress, and that there's been complaints by people, by a large part of the public, about whether whether their sentences were appropriate. And what I said is I would appoint a special counsel to look at that. My purpose, Chris, is not to exonerate those people, but rather just to restore peace. I think, we're living at a time when Americans don't trust their government anymore. And that is really what the problem is. There is no trust in government, and we need to restore that trust. So what I'm going to do as president is I'm going to make Americans, people who I don't agree with on issues, if there's large numbers of people who see the world in one way, even if I see it in a different way, I'm going to listen to them. And I'm going to fairly look at their point of view. And, presidents appoint special counsels all the time. They do it even when, to investigate themselves. So to assure the public that there is a process here that the public can trust. And we need to do that now.
Look, I get it. I get the misgivings. I'm worried about special counsels. I believe the Department of Justice should do its job. And I believe that the 9/11 Commission was really the gold star standard of how to do this. I think there should be one on the pandemic. I think there should be one on when life begins. I think there should be one on, what the sentence range was on January 6th. If you want, that's fine. But I think that you got to get it away from these special counsels, because they don't seem to really bring peace to anybody's mind about situations. You and I have talked about this, Bobby, and I'll let the audience in on it. They can judge me. What else is new? I find your candidacy to be really intriguing because I think that you have become such an antenna for all of the energy that gets sent out from both sides. Every time one side thinks that Bobby's going to affect us more than the other side, they start coming at you as how toxic you are to the process. And I believe it shows how toxic the process is. You have been in constant cleanup mode for 3 weeks now, ever since you started getting more media attention in the latest round of polling. And what does that mean to you? Look, my advice to you, by the way, would be, man, you better stop clarifying things, because people don't do that anymore. They just stick to their guns and let their supporters have their back and just say the other side's worse. They never apologize. They never correct anymore. I get why you're doing it, because I know you. But what do you think this dynamic says about where we are, that you cannot say anything right?
Well, when I announced my campaign, and it's interesting because my dad was in the same position that I was when he ran in 1968. He was running against an incumbent president of his own party. He didn't have any institutional support from labor unions, from the liberal press, from the New York Times. The Village Voice was all against him. The big city mayors were all against him. All the institutions, even the people who he had brought into office 8 years earlier with the New Frontier, with his brother, they were all now working for Johnson. So he was really kind of alone. And he ran for a moral reason, which is he just could not see supporting Johnson on the war. So he thought he had to speak out against the war, and he was going to run, even though he had very, very little chance of winning at that time. But he made his campaign an experiment in telling the truth to people. And he told students at colleges that he was going to end their draft deferments, which they didn't want to hear. He told medical students that they were going to pay for his health care system. He told black Americans in Watts who were revolting that they needed to abide by the law. He told the University of Alabama white kids that they needed to be sensitive about civil rights. And all of these things were things that politicians advised him not to do. And he did them anyway, and he ended up winning the Democratic primaries because of that and driving Johnson out of the race. And I believe he would have been president if he had been, if he hadn't been assassinated. When I announced 9 months ago, I said, our whole country has just had a big medical experiment for 3 years performed on them. And I'm going to do a mass experiment now myself. And it's an experiment just in telling the truth to people. The truth as I see it, which, I could be wrong about, but if I'm wrong, I'm going to change that. And if there's an appetite in this country for hearing the truth actually from politicians, then I'll win. I'll be president next November. I think people are so tired of being lied to. And, when I was a kid, when my uncle was president, it was 80% of Americans believed the government. Americans believed the government would never lie to them. In fact, the first time that Americans realized our government lies to us is when Gary Francis Powers was shot down in the U-2. And in 1973, the Pentagon Papers came out, and Americans were like, oh, my God, the government actually lies to us. Today, 90% of Americans believe the government lies virtually every day. And if you don't believe that, then you're not paying attention. And one of the problems is, Chris, as you know, the journalists, the press, is no longer doing its job of questioning the president, of maintaining that posture of eternal and fierce skepticism. They've become instead amplifiers for all the lies that the government tells us. And you look at this polarization, and it's driven so much because people no longer have faith in any of the institutions of our country. The press, the regulatory agencies, the Congress, the president, they think everybody lies to them. And, I think if we're going to bring people together and end this toxic polarization, we've got to restore people's faith in our government. And if I'm in there, I'm going to tell the truth to people. And that's what I'm trying to do now. And it's not always easy because you have to admit when you made a mistake. And I made a mistake this weekend.
Well, look, if you're willing to come forward and say, look, I don't know whether it was insurrection, depends on your thing, but it was a very bad thing and I didn't mean anything else, that's fine. As long as you stay true to what you believe about things, people have a great detector for it. They may disagree with where you are on something even after you clarify it, but it is still refreshing to people because we're in a situation now where, I believe there are a lot of people in the media who are doing the job the right way and how they cover the White House and they're doing it for the right reasons. It's just hard for them to break through because, if you don't play the game like everybody else, you don't get any love from either side. You don't get love from the administration. You don't get love from who hates the administration if you're not catering to them. But it is the way people expect to live everywhere else in their lives, which is, hey, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. I meant this and I said that. That's on me. I won't do it again. It's just not allowed in politics. They bury you, which is why I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about the dynamic. And as I have said, whether people like it or not, as long as you're in the race, you're welcome to make your case to the American people. That's the way the job works.
Chris, thank you so much for having me.
All right. I'll talk to you again. Robert F. Kennedy, Jr.